So, good morning.
Good morning.
Recording, and I think we're ready to go.
Yes, so welcome everybody. This is the new session of the Meet the Coach webinar series that we organized from Agile 42. And today we will be talking about leadership behaviors, or actually Simon will be talking from the German office. My name is Pascal Papatemris and I will be like the host, co-hosting here. We will do it this way that you will not be able to talk actively yourself, but if you want to express something, please add it to the chat. And if you have specific questions, then please add it to the Q&A. So there are two different buttons, one for the chat and one for the Q&A. So discussion will happen over the chat and questions will be then on the Q&A, and we will visit the questions at the end of the session. This session will be recorded. So if you want to listen to it later on or share it with your friends, that will be also the case. We will then probably next week start it somewhere in YouTube, and then we will send you also a message on that. Thank you, and I pass it over to Simon.
Great, thank you very much, Pascal. Good morning, everyone. My name is Simon. I'm an Agile 42 coach based in Berlin, Germany, which I guess doesn't play such a big role nowadays because more or less everybody's working from home anyway. So as Pascal mentioned, I'll be speaking about leadership behaviors today. And the material I'm presenting is taken from our Organic Agility Foundations course and this nice book, which we just published. It's available on Amazon. If you want to read more about organic agility, for example, leadership behaviors, then please purchase this on Amazon. Yeah. We're also looking into possibilities to deliver our course material virtually, as we want to continue delivering value to our clients in the community, even during the current events and the current crisis. Yeah. So I will now start presenting and sharing. So now you should be able to see my screen. Yeah. And
yes, we can see it.
Great. I will stop my video for now and turn it back on later. Yeah, so you're not distracted. So today, as mentioned already, as you know, of course, we will speak about leadership behaviors. And the first thing I'd like to ask you is what comes to mind? So what are your associations when you think of leadership? And I would encourage you to now drop a line in the comments. What do you think? What comes to mind when you hear leadership? Please drop a few associations, some ideas, some comments in the chat. Excellent. Thank you for your suggestions. So I'm reading lots of great examples of effective leadership.
Simon, could you read loud, perhaps?
Yes.
So that we have it also on the video, because that's not...
Where does it start? Helping others to succeed, support and guidance, empowerment versus control, inspiring and motivating, teamwork, lead by example, empowering, management, enable people to work efficiently, take responsibility, enabling teams to perform effectively, role models, reputation, being wanted but not indispensable, relationships using influence, doing your best to help others be successful, mutual respect, setting direction, maintain and communicate direction. Great. Thank you for your examples. So to summarize, leadership can mean different things. And so most people probably assume that leadership is a, let's say, a quality or a capability that some people have and others do not. Or it could mean a role they are put into. Yeah, that's what most people associate with leadership. So today, we will be referring to leadership as a capability of both an individual and an organization, which manifests itself through a variety of behaviors and interactions in different contexts and relationships. Okay, so not just an individual quality or capability, but also something that emerges from an organization. And why is that? Because in our era, the VUCA era, so which is characterized by volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, effective leadership can mean a big number of things. So all the things that you just mentioned, so supporting people, role modeling behavior, encouraging people, guiding people, coaching people, and many, many other things. Yeah, and what I'd like to highlight today in my talk is that leadership behaviors will co-evolve with an organization, and that the effectiveness of those leadership behaviors depends not only on a personal attitude of one individual leader, but also on the context, the situation in which it emerges or which requires leadership behavior, the expectations of our followers, and the individual relationships that we have with our people. Yeah. So let me break this down quickly. Yeah. So there are different dimensions of leadership behavior, because as human beings, we will develop multiple identities that are associated with different relationships. Okay. So what does that mean? You could, for example, be a mother. You could be a daughter. You could be, you could have friends and be a friend to those. You could be a business owner or any kind of leader. Yeah, so you have different identities and you have different relationships, and your role in a certain context will require or catalyze even certain behaviors. However, your beliefs and values are shared by your multiple identities. Yeah? So if that's not the case, then you're schizophrenic. Yeah? So secondly, culture plays a role. So the cultural disposition of the organization or the environment that you're interacting with is another important dimension that we should be aware of. Culture is probably the sum of behaviors, values. So what are the values that hold people together? What leadership behavior especially are people expecting? And some other things. Yeah, so culture is a vague or a broad, a difficult to grasp topic, but we will go into that a bit more today. And the third thing, the third dimension that I want to talk about is context. Okay, so context or situation plays obviously a big role in determining whether a particular behavior is appropriate or not. Let me give you an example. So currently, in our current worldwide crisis, yeah, it is probably a bad idea to foster democratic decision-making and consensus building, because that is simply too time-consuming. Instead, the kind of leadership behavior that is required is decisive action, yeah, perhaps even draconian decision-making, because if we don't use that kind of leadership behavior, then catastrophic consequences might happen. Okay. So another thing I want to highlight just very briefly here is the importance of emotional intelligence. So Daniel Goleman wrote a nice book on emotional intelligence, and Daniel Goleman demonstrated evidence on the relationship between emotional intelligence and effective leadership. Basically, to summarize, stating that the emotional state of a leader drives their behavior, which then in turn affects the people around them. Yeah? So it has some sort of impact on the environment, on the organization. Yeah? And so in order to become an effective leader and demonstrate effective leadership behavior, we need to go through a process of self-discovery and develop emotional intelligence capabilities. And the first step is to become aware of your emotions and what triggers those emotions. What needs of yours are either met or unmet. Yeah, so things like nonviolent communication, the framework, might come in handy here in order to develop self-awareness. Yeah, this is the first important step to growing your leadership capabilities. Now, in order to make decisions and perform actions that have a positive impact on our environment, on our followers, we need to be able to control ourselves, yeah, to control our emotions. Okay, self-management. And the next important step is then to develop empathy for the people around us, to understand the emotions of others, and to grow social skills to interact with them effectively. So this is, in summary, the importance of emotional intelligence and why it's so important in the context of leadership behavior. Okay, I'd like to share another, another perspective with you, which is getting to results. So the question here is, how do organizations produce the right results? And there is this nice pyramid, the results pyramid, which was developed by Partners in Leadership, which illustrates the connections between experiences, beliefs, actions, and results. Okay, so what are those connections? As the pyramid suggests, experiences is the largest level, the level at the bottom. Yeah, so we make lots of experiences, we gain experience over time. And so some of these experiences shape beliefs, shape our beliefs of what is right and what is wrong. Yeah, this is important that these beliefs are shaped in order to make the right decisions or good decisions. Yeah, and so these beliefs will drive or inform actions, and those actions then lastly drive the results. Okay, and it's a pyramid. So we make lots of experiences, we create lots of beliefs. Some of those beliefs will inform the actions or the behaviors, the decisions that we make, also as leaders. And some of these actions will drive the results that we want to get. Yeah. So I encourage you to reflect on this, yeah, for a bit. But probably after the talk. Yeah, so let me carry on and share something else. So some results that we produce as organizations can be measured financially. Yeah, there is an economical value in them. And other results might represent goals that the organization is setting out to achieve. Okay, that are not necessarily measurable in financial numbers. And usually such goals would represent stepping stones in the direction of an organizational vision. Okay, so what is the organization trying to be or become, yeah, or trying to produce in terms of value for the world or for their clients? Yeah, what are the problems they want to solve? And so the question here is, what role does leadership play in getting the right results? So traditionally, we tend to focus on managing actions, which is just the tip of the iceberg, yeah, the tip of the pyramid here. And managing actions as an approach is quite difficult to scale because actions, as you must have realized by now, are just an outcome of experiences and beliefs. Yeah? So scaling is very tricky. Yeah? And the sphere of influence, when we speak about managing actions in order to drive results, includes only the organizational structure. So things like processes, tools, roles, responsibilities, yeah? The organizational structure. So while management happens at the top of the pyramid, leadership happens at the bottom of the pyramid, yeah? So what does that mean? The focus of leadership is on organizational culture as opposed to organizational structure, because here we're creating new experiences which then result in new stories which potentially will bring change along with them, yeah, those new stories. And at this level, if we're acting at this level as leaders, we can change the stories that are being told in our environment, in our organization, which will drive cultural change. Yeah, we can create new rituals. We can influence the habits of the people in our environment, our organization, and we can influence the behaviors of those people. Yeah. So the key takeaway here is to shift the balance, yeah, from managing actions to creating experiences, to work on an organizational culture level. Because if we do that, we create experiences, we grow the organization's leadership capability. Yeah, we nurture the autonomy of groups inside our organization, inside our environment, because this will help them to intuitively make good decisions. Yeah, so we're distributing the responsibility for making decisions, and this is an approach that scales, and this is the key benefit. Yeah, when we shift the balance from managing actions to creating experiences, from managing to leading. Okay, I'll let that rest for a sec. Because now I would like to go a little bit deeper into the leadership behaviors that we distinguish in our organic agility foundations material. So we distinguish or contrast 6 different leadership behaviors that an organization can develop and apply in different contexts, and that are appropriate in certain cultures. Yeah. So the first leadership behavior I would like to very briefly mention and describe is directing. So here, the leader is perceived as the expert. The leader is perceived as an authority. And the leader is in charge of assigning and controlling work and is being held accountable for the results of the group's work. Yeah? So if in this kind of context, for this kind of leadership behavior, bilateral communication is not welcome. Yeah? So instead, the leader expects compliance from their followers, expects their followers to comply, and this can be both frustrating for followers or comforting. That really depends on the cultural context and the followers' individual expectations. Yeah? So for some people, this can be very comforting. Yeah, I know exactly what to do or what I'm supposed to do because the leader is communicating this very clearly. This can be very frustrating for others because people feel disengaged, overruled. Yeah. However, so especially if you think about the events or the current crisis that is going on, that kind of leadership behavior, yeah, which is characterized by draconian decision making, by very clear communication and very clear direction, this can be essential, yeah, when facing a crisis. Okay, so it's not necessarily bad behavior. Yeah, so let me say this once again. So none of the leadership behaviors that I will be introducing now is per definition positive or negative. Yeah, it depends on multiple aspects, on the relationships, on context, on cultural disposition. Yeah, and that's key to learn and key for you to take away. So the next leadership behavior I would like to introduce is demanding. Yeah. So here the leader is perceived as someone with extremely high standards. Okay. They are competitive. They focus on performance. They lead by example. Yeah, which is one of the things that was mentioned in the comments. So here the followers focus on their targets. They are probably motivated by targets, by challenging targets, and the constant push from their leader can be very motivating, especially in the short term. Could also be stressful in the long term. Yeah, so constantly being pushed and encouraged to perform and to get out of your comfort zone and so on, that can be very stressful in the long term. Yeah. So how are people or how are groups held together here? Probably they're motivated by meeting their targets. And what can also be very essential here is that the leader will need conflict resolution, conflict solving skills, yeah, in order to bring the group together and to outperform, to leave their comfort zone, which can cause conflict very easily. Yeah, so conflict resolution skills are probably very important when demonstrating, when presenting this kind of leadership behavior. So the next leadership behavior I would like to introduce is conducting. So here, the leader coordinates, conducts, and encourages collaboration because that collaboration is essential. That's at least what the leader and the group believes in. Yeah? Collaboration is required because it increases quality, the quality of the output that the group is producing collaboratively, yeah, together. So probably the leader is still responsible for making sure that the right results are being produced, and is responsible for enabling the collaboration within the group. But the followers feel responsible at least for their individual contribution, yeah? Which is different in the context of demonstrating directing behavior, where the leader is responsible for all the output that a group produces. Yeah? So in this kind of context, when this kind of leadership behavior is appropriate or required or effective, people can rely on help from their peers within their group, and they're held together by very clear roles, very clear responsibilities. Everybody knows exactly what they're contributing individually, and they're held together by emerging group dynamics, yeah? Because collaboration will bring the group closer together, yeah? And this can also be motivating. So the next leadership behavior, and this is the fourth out of 6 that I would like to introduce, is envisioning. So here the leader motivates people by providing a compelling and a challenging vision of the future, what the organization or a group is trying to achieve. The leader would inspire collaboration also, yeah. So similarly to the previously introduced leadership behavior, and the sense of shared responsibility. Yeah, so the belief here is that the group can only collaboratively, so together, produce something of value. Yeah, that will move them in the direction of their vision. So the leaders must have faith in the abilities, the capabilities of their followers. The followers, they value collaboration, yeah, because they know that only together they can produce something valuable. And they are motivated by their feeling of being able to learn continuously, constantly, and achieve more together. Yeah, this can be very motivating. And they're held together by a shared identity, a shared purpose, and a sense of belonging, yeah? Because they know that their part contributes to a greater whole. So the next leadership behavior is coaching. So here, the leader, or the coach, the leader who demonstrates coaching leadership behavior supports team members with their personal growth and supports the entire team with becoming more effective as a whole. Yeah? And the leader is probably a servant leader who serves a team but leads the team as well. Yeah? So the team shares responsibility, and here we're referring to a real team, yeah, because they probably have a shared purpose, a shared goal, and they collaborate very closely to achieve those goals. And they are motivated by mastering new challenges. They are interested in leaving their comfort zone and learning continuously, so becoming better and better at what they're doing. And they're held together by their shared purpose, their shared goals, and their self-direction. Yeah. So the servant leader here, who demonstrates coaching leadership behavior, will foster self-direction, autonomy of the team they're interacting with. And the sixth leadership behavior that I would like to introduce is catalyzing. So catalyzing leadership behavior. Here the leader will amplify, amplify or catalyze the success of the team, connects them with the rest of the organization, and ensures that they're contributing to strategy co-creation. Yeah? So the leader would provide both praise and challenges and enable synergies within the team. The followers of the team, they're probably fully self-governing. They maximize the value they're delivering to customers, and they're constantly incorporating customer feedback autonomously. So they're completely in charge of interacting with the customer and finding out what it is that they need. Probably the team is very open-minded, very curious, and very adaptive. Yeah, so they're curious in a sense of they want to learn what else can be done to deliver value to the customers, what it is that they really need. They're open-minded. They're not fixed on the way of working. They adapt their way of working continuously and strive to become better continuously. Yeah. And they're very motivated by the contribution to the greater whole. And they're probably held together by their constant search for new challenges. Okay, so this is the leadership behavior and the context where it's appropriate. So, and this concludes what I wanted to share with you in terms of theory. Yeah, and so I'm saying theory because this was probably quite theoretical, and today I'm intending to share these approaches, these ideas, these theories with you to help you reflect on your context, your culture, and your identity in order to find out what kind of leadership behaviors are appropriate in which context. Yeah, because leadership behaviors depend heavily on context, culture, the expectations of our followers, the relationships with our followers, And I want to say this once more, the leadership behaviors, there are no leadership behaviors that are negative in themselves, but only behaviors that are not helpful within a specific context, a specific situation, or might be perceived negatively in a given culture, in a given cultural context. Yeah? So we can grow an organization's leadership capability by shifting the balance from managing actions to creating experiences, because this will shape people's beliefs and help them develop their ability to make good decisions autonomously and intuitively, which is an approach that scales. Okay, and so now I'm curious, what are you taking away and what questions do you have? And I will stop sharing now. So perhaps first we can spend 2-3 minutes to capture a few takeaways. So what are useful things that you heard that you might want to continue reflecting on? And please drop some of those examples of takeaways into the chat, and we'll use a few minutes to collaboratively reflect.
Yeah, and at the same time, you can put questions on the Q&A.
Exactly.
So there is one takeaway from Nico Rantala. The distinction between managing and leading was very informative. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
That refers to the pyramid of results.
Mm-hmm.
So Maria Nikolova says, focus my work more on beliefs and experiences. Thank you. And Alberto Cesena says that my takeaways can be pyramid of results, etc., and leadership behaviors. Perhaps while we wait for more, there is one from Melanie Fuchs. Key takeaway, creating stronger awareness on what experiences we create by our doing was new insight for me. Simon Mills, understanding context is key. And perhaps we can, there were 2 questions at this moment. Lucy is writing, do you agree that if the lead understands the behavior of the team, if possible of each single person, it could keep the effective on?
Okay, I need a minute to reflect on that. So do you agree that if the lead understands the behavior of the team, if possible of each single person, it could keep the effectiveness, I guess. Lucy, perhaps you could explain, because I'm struggling to understand the question. And perhaps while you explain, Lucy, we can go to the next question, which is from Francesco. Is there an example for each of the 6 points? So I guess you're referring to the 6 leadership behaviors in order to understand when it is applied properly or not. Yeah. So an example for the 6 leadership behaviors. And I'd like actually to throw this question back into the community. So perhaps you can try to reflect on situations and cultural contexts where the 6 different leadership behaviors that I introduced to you could be appropriate, could be effective. Yeah. So perhaps you can pick one: directing, demanding, envisioning, conducting, coaching, or catalyzing, and try to find an example where this kind of leadership behavior could be effective and appropriate to drive the right results, potentially.
There is also a question by Heikki. Culture is often created by the people, so choosing team members is a good way of steering culture. What other methods are there to direct the culture to a certain direction?
Yes, so to this question, so again, I'll read it out once more. Culture is often created by the people, so choosing team members is a good way of steering culture. What other methods are there to direct the culture to a certain direction? Yeah. So as you remember, the pyramid of results. So creating experiences is key, as many people have now also pointed out. And the question is, how can you create those experiences? What are the rituals? What are the habits? What are the things that you can experiment with, potentially with a small group at first, and then roll it out to a larger part of the organization that will create new experiences or shape people's beliefs, which will then influence culture, drive cultural change. Yeah. So I can give you an example from this week. I was working with 2 different clients this week, and one of the clients, they wanted to shift to more collaboration, more experience sharing. Yeah. And one of the things they established in order to drive that cultural change was to establish a ritual in which a guild or a community of practice would come together and share experiences in a very structured and focused manner. Yeah. And this was a very easy way of fostering the experience sharing. Yeah. And the only thing they did was organizing this event or establishing a ritual. Yeah. So sometimes small things that you introduce to an organization can have an effect on the organizational culture and on the people's experiences. Yeah. You could also experiment with if it's more autonomy or more intuitive decision making you're striving to achieve. You could experiment with removing constraints from a team and making them more autonomous and more empowering them, would be the buzzword here, to make decisions in a certain context. And you could then monitor if this is driving cultural change. Yeah? So sometimes small things, removing barriers, connecting people, removing constraints can have an effect, positive or negative. Yeah, it can also go in the wrong direction sometimes, on the organizational culture.
Lucy has been clarifying a bit her question. She wants to ask about know the team, know if possible each single person, because sometimes I usually try to do that to improve the team, but it's a big challenge.
Yeah. So I guess if you're referring to leading a team and you want to understand individual team members better, so of course it might be useful to have one-on-ones with the individual team members, but these individual team members have an identity in a team. Yeah, and that's something to be aware of, because the team is an identity in itself. And the individual parts, the team members as a whole, when they come together, they will have specific identities within this team. So usually focusing on individuals, for example, when conflict emerges from within the team, is something we should avoid, rather than looking or observing the team interacting with each other as a whole. Yeah, so understanding the team identity, that's usually key in the context where you're coaching or leading a team.
And there was a question also on the chat from Mia or Milla, how to shift from a directive leadership behavior to any other if the teams are used to being managed, directed, and to receive clear orders?
Yeah, this is a complex question. It's a great question. Thank you, Mila. But it's quite complex and difficult to answer. So what you can do, and it's, I believe it's described in our Organic Agility Foundation's book as well. I'm referring to the continuity link, where you identify behaviors that are perceived positively or negatively in a given context. For example, in a team, yeah, because you're mentioning teams here, and then finding out, so what kinds of behaviors are perceived positively or negatively, and are there any wait a second, let me take a step back. So one thing that I want to mention here is it's very difficult to shift from a leadership behavior that is based on control, for example, directing, to a leadership behavior that is based on autonomy, for example, catalyzing behavior or coaching behavior. Yeah, so that's quite a big jump. But what you could consider doing is to shift from one leadership behavior to the adjacent possible. So, for example, from directing leadership behavior to demanding leadership behavior, yeah? Because that is not such a big jump. Those leadership behaviors, they are all valid in a given context, yeah, but they are characterized by different levels of control and autonomy, yeah. And the way that I introduced them was following a sequence where control decreases and autonomy increases, yeah. So yeah, I think I'm going to leave it with this. So figure out what might be the adjacent possible, and don't try to take a jump that is too big. Thank you.
Then there was another question from Ben Davis. Do you have examples of how a particular leader, for example, a public figure, sportsperson, CEO, etc., uses a certain leadership style behavior to help people drive positive direction in whatever they are doing?
Thank you for the question, Ben. It's kind of a generic question. So examples of particular leaders using certain behaviors to drive positive direction. So I can share an experience from this week that I found was very effective leadership behavior. Yeah, where there was a tough conversation in a group, and it seemed as if there was tension, or it was obvious that there was tension, but it seemed as if people were not feeling comfortable sharing what was going on for them. And one particular person, and it doesn't matter if this was a superior person or a hierarchically a superior person, the CEO or the leader of the group, it's because leadership emerges, yeah, leadership happens. It emerges from a group in different contexts. And this particular person was demonstrating very effective leadership behavior simply by pointing out that people were not speaking plainly and not sharing what was going on for them. And pointing out that their feeling was that a particular person and another particular person were hiding something, and encouraging them to open up. And I think that was very helpful in this particular conversation to drive change or drive positive results, because there was clarification happening. It was tough, it was uncomfortable, but it was necessary.
Okay, and we have two more questions. Perhaps if you can answer shortly on both of them, if we have time. Francesco's bringing up a catalyzing example. I was working with a team dividing work into back-end and front-end, despite they were in the same team. This was bringing them to think as silos. During a retro, I challenged them to improve their metrics having a morbidity and quality approach, considering the whole value stream of their work. Could it be a good example, or is this, or in this case, more leadership aspects overlapped?
I think it's a good example if this is what has driven positive change. So it really depends on how you interpret these things, right? So if in this context, in this particular example, this kind of leadership behavior has been effective, then congrats. I think so. The theory or the ideas that I'm sharing with you, these concepts, I'm trying to help you reflect on your personal contexts and situations. Yeah. So whatever works for you, works for you.
Okay, and then there is Maria asking, the last 4 leadership styles conducting Envision, coaching, and catalyzing seem to me as very depending on team dynamics, culture, and leader needs to be very responsive, adaptable, and aware of the team and situations. So quite complex at times. Do you foresee training, sharing best practices, guidelines, etc., on adopting and mastering these types of leadership styles?
Yeah, so sharing, let's say not best practices, but sharing experiences. So it can be very helpful to share your experiences with other leaders and to try things like leadership dojos or coaching dojos, where you're discussing or sharing cases, especially tough cases, and collaboratively brainstorming on what you could have done differently. And coming together with other people who might be from similar contexts or even very different contexts, who are making different experiences and discussing things. So that can be very useful. Training, of course, could be useful, but I think so these things are quite complex and capabilities that require lots of practice. Yeah. So a training can start your journey, but not end your journey. Yeah. So a training can be the entry point. And yeah, I think I'm going to leave it with that.
Yes, and I guess there is no end because there are always changes and new surprises, and you need to adjust your leadership style.
Yeah.
Thank you very much from my side also. Thank you, Simon. I would like to also share that next week, Friday in the afternoon, we will have a webinar of Meet the Coach related to active listening. And we are planning for the 24th of March, which will be a Tuesday after that, a webinar. It will be an organic agility webinar, so it's a different place where you might find it, perhaps on our webpage. And the topic will be why your company will fail in 2020. And that will be presented by Lasse Ziegler. Thank you, and I wish you all a very nice day.
Me too. Thank you, Pascal. Thank you, everybody who participated. And stay safe.